What up, what up? Welcome back to the channel, and as always, thank you all for watching. Today we have another high-powered game of EDH, and starting us off, Mark is bringing back his Locust God deck. This deck is trying to use its draw power to his advantage and win through a combo. David is bringing his Mishra Eminent 1 deck. It's trying to abuse artifacts, enter the battlefield trigger, and leave the battlefield trigger over and over again for value. Will is playing Jodah. He's trying to dodge his taxes by not paying full price for massive mana costed spells. He's trying to cast things like Omniscience for 5 mana. I'll be bringing back my Ovika deck. This is trying to make a bunch of goblins and storm off for the big win. Let's take it to the table.
Mark starts us off by playing a Bloodstained Mire. He'll go ahead and crack that. He'll fetch up a Volcanic Island and cast Gamble. This will let him search his library for any card, but he has to discard a card at random. So he leaves his cards out, roll the dice, and he discards card number 2, which is an opt. After that, he'll pass the turn over to David. David plays a Xander's Lounge tapped and pass to Will. Will plays a Bloodstained Mire himself. He'll go ahead and crack that. And he'll get an Overgrown Tomb, which he'll put into play untapped. Then he'll cast Utopia Sprawl. Passing it over to me. I'm gonna play Ancient Tomb and cast Talisman of Creativity into a Mystic Remora. I'll pass it to Mark from there. Mark plays an island, then he'll cast Soul Ring, triggering my fish, so I'll draw a card. He'll cast Is It Signet, I'll draw a card, and then he'll pass to David. David plays the Seat of the Synod, then he'll cast Mycosynth Wellspring. This lets him fetch up a basic mountain, put it right in his hand, and that'll trigger my fish. I'll draw a card, and David passes to Will. Will plays a Marsh Flats. He'll crack that to fetch up a Sacred Foundry. It'll come into play tapped. Then he'll cast Arcane Signet. That'll let me draw a card from Mystic Remora, and he'll pass it to me. Now I feel like I drew enough cards from the fish, so I won't pay the upkeep cost. I'll play a mountain as my land, then I'll cast Jeweled Lotus. After that, I'm gonna cast Strike It Rich, give myself a treasure token. Will's gonna respond by casting Vampiric Tutor. He'll search up a card and put it on top of his library. And that'll end my turn, so I'll pass it to Mark. Mark plays Mana Confluence into a Gilded Lotus, then he'll cast Narset, Partner of Veils. It enters with 5 counters, and he'll pass it to David. David plays a mountain, then he'll cast Goblin Engineer. He searches his library for a Cursed Mirror and puts it into his graveyard. Then he'll pass the turn. Will plays a Plains, then he'll cast Rhystic Study and pass the turn to me. And I'm realizing right now that I should have paid my fish's upkeep. Well, I'll play Stormcarved Coast as my land for turn and cast my commander, Ovika, Enigma Goliath. This triggers Rhystic Study. I let Will draw, and I pass it over to Mark. Mark downticks Narset, looks at the top 4 cards of his library, and he can reveal a non-creature card. He reveals City on Fire. That's a scary card. He gets to put it into his hand. Then he'll cast his commander, the Locust God. I'm gonna mana drain his commander and trigger Rhystic Study, so Will draws a card. I get to make 2 goblins from my commander, and with that, Mark is gonna pass the turn to David. David plays a Myriad Landscape, then he'll cast Dragon Spark Reactor. It'll enter with a charge counter, and he'll pass the turn to Will. Will plays a Command Tower, then he'll cast Jodah, Archmage Eternal, and pass it to me. I'm gonna play a Cascade Bluffs, then I'll cast Shatter Skull Smashing, paying for Rhystic Study, and put enough mana in it to take out both Narset and Jodah. That's gonna trigger my commander, so I'll get 8 goblins with haste. I'll move to combat, sending my commander at David, 5 at Mark, and 5 goblins at Will. I'll pass it to Mark from there. Mark plays an island, and then he'll recast his commander, the Locust God. Mark doesn't pay for Rhystic Study, Will gets to draw, and Mark will end his turn from there. David plays an artifact land. That puts another counter on Dragonspark Reactor. Then he'll activate Goblin Engineer, sacrificing Microsynth Wellspring, putting an island to hand and Cursed Mirror into play. Dragonspark Reactor gets another counter, and he'll pass the turn over to Will. Will plays Discarding Tarn. He'll crack it to fetch up a Breeding Pool. From there, he'll cast Birds of Paradise. Then he casts Gamble. He'll tutor for a card. Then he puts that card to his hand, and he has to discard a card at random. He asks one of us to choose, and we'd pick number 3. So he has to discard Ruinous Ultimatum, which fortunately for us is the card he tutored for. After that, on his end step, I'm gonna channel Otawar Soaring City, targeting Mark's commander. He has to pick it up, and then I'll start my turn. I'll play Temple of Epiphany. I'll scry another land to the bottom, and I'm getting desperate as I've drawn nothing but lands this game. I'll cast Strike It Rich as his flashback cost, making a treasure token, and this will give me 3 goblins thanks to my commander. I'll move to combat. I'll send my commander at David, 6 goblins at Mark, and I'll send 7 goblins at Will before passing the turn. Mark casts a Nexus of Fate. He'll pay for Will's Ristic Study. Nexus of Fate shuffles back into his library when he casts it. And he'll go ahead and start his next turn. He'll play Temple of Epiphany, scry 1 card to the bottom, and after that he'll go ahead and recast his commander. From there he'll move to his end step. On his end step, David's going to go ahead and sacrifice his Myriad Landscape to go ahead and fetch 2 basic lands. He'll get 2 swamps and start his turn. David's going to go ahead and cast his commander, Mishra, Eminent One. He'll pay for Ristic Study, move to combat, and make a Mishra Warform copy of Cursed Mirror, which comes in as a copy of Locust God. He'll send the Locust God copy at me. I'll take the damage. Then he'll use Goblin Engineer's ability, go ahead and tap that to sack the Mishra Warform. And from his graveyard, he'll bring back Microsynth Wellspring. On ETB, he'll fetch up a basic land to his hand. That'll also trigger Dragonspark Reactor, and he'll pass turn to Will from there. Will starts his turn off by casting Mystic Gomorrah, and then he'll pass it to me. I'm going to play a Command Beacon as my land for turn, and then cast Past in Flames. Trigger warning, I'm about to do something incredibly stupid, but fun as hell. Past in Flames gives me 3 Goblin tokens, and then I'll go ahead and cast Blasphemous Act. From there I'll hold priority, and I'll tap 2 to go ahead and cast Mana Drain on my own Blasphemous Act, with the goal of getting 11 goblins and starting my next turn with 9 extra mana. Will responds with Arcane Denial, countering my Mana Drain and killing any hopes of my cool play. Sadly, after blowing up my own board, I'll draw 2 cards from Arcane Denial and pass the turn to Mark. Mark plays a Shivering Reef as his land for turn, and then he'll recast his commander, the Locust God again. He'll activate the Locust God's ability to draw himself a card and discard a card. Because he drew a card, that'll make him an insect, which he'll send at me for 1 damage, and he'll pass turn to David from there. David casts his commander, Mishra, Eminent One. He doesn't pay for Ristic Study, so Will gets to draw a card. He'll make a copy of Cursed Mirror. That copy is going to enter as a copy of the Locust God. He'll go to combat and send that Locust God at Mark. Mark doesn't block, so he'll take the damage, and David passes turn to Will. Will's going to let his Mystic Remora die. Then he'll play Polluted Delta as his land for turn and recast his commander, Jodah, Archmage Eternal. He'll move to his end step, discard down to 7, and pass the turn to me. I'm going to start my turn by casting Expressive Iteration. I'll look at the top 3 cards of my library. I'll put one face down on the bottom. I'll exile Command Tower. I'll play Command Tower, and the third card I'll put in my hand. I'm gonna go ahead and cast a Soul Ring and pass the turn to Mark. Mark gets an insect for drawing, and then he'll cast Kindred Discovery. This is a problem, because with his commander and Kindred Discovery, whenever he draws a card, he makes an insect. Whenever he makes an insect, he'll draw a card. This is a combo with Locust God, so if the table can't stop it, Mark's gonna win the game. Will's gonna draw from Rhystic Study, then he'll crack his Polluted Delta for a land. From there, he'll cast Izzet Charm. Unfortunately, Mark has the 2 mana to pay for Izzet Charm, so he'll activate his commander's ability to draw himself a card and discard a card. When he does that, it starts the infinite loop, and all he has to do is show us a win con, which he does. Firestorm. And with Firestorm, he can discard more than enough cards to deal more than enough damage to take us out of the game. So with that, Mark's gonna take the game this week. Hope you enjoyed the gameplay, and until next time, I'll see you at the table.